Hiya everyone, in this video we're going to have a little look at how we mark out cuts and fit a mortise and tenon. I've selected two pieces of timber. These are 40 by 30, same as our standard joint material in the college. Let's get that out of the way. So the drawing we have says we need to divide this timber into thirds. Okay, so 30mm, divide that by 3. I'll let you do that one. So the nearest, the chisel I've got here happens to be a 10mm, which is great. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my marking gauge and set that to the width of my chisel. So when you're setting your marking gauge, the two pins on here, okay, you want to set it to the very point. Okay, so not down low where you'll end up too big. Right, so you want to set it to the very top of those two individual points. Okay, so when you've done that and you've got the very tip of those points set right on the outside of that chisel, then we're ready to find the centre. As before, first thing I'm going to do is keep those two pins set where they are and just move the stock and estimate where I think the centre is of those two pins, so about there. Tighten that up. Okay, and then I'm just going to roll that forward, put a little mark. A little mark, so I'm a little bit out there. Okay, so you can see my two dots each side don't quite line up, so I'm just going to adjust that. So where the centre of those two dots are, as before when we did our halving, that's going to be, so I know my mortise is going to be in the centre of my timber. A little bit more. There we go, that's better. Okay, so I just do that. Roll the pins into the top, make a little indent, come from the other side. So those dots line up with each other, so I know that mortise is in the centre of my timber. Okay, so what I'm also going to do is the all-important, put my face and edge marks on the timber. Okay, so I'm going to use pen so you can see it, but ideally you'd use a pencil. Yep, that looks good. So I'm going to have face and edge. And the same on this one. Mark my, let's just check. Yeah. Okay, so I'm always going to work from those two all important reference faces. Okay, so our two pieces of timber are going to go together in a T shape. Okay, so we're doing a through mortise and tenon. So they'll be joined in a T shape in that orientation. So the first part we're going to do is the mortise. Okay, so as the name is called mortise and tenon, we normally tackle the mortise first because it's easier to adjust a tenon after, which you'll see in a minute. So first thing I'm going to do is check the drawing, and I believe it says 70mm. So I line up on my 100mm mark. Get out of the way. 100mm. Put a little tick mark at 70. Get my square up against my reference face and scribe that across. So nice and gently to start with. A little bit deeper, a little bit deeper. Okay, and I can take my other piece to mark a width, bring that up to the square, put another little tick mark there, scalpel in the tick mark, and square that across. Okay, so I'm going to mark that all the way around. So scalpel in the tick mark, and gently once, a little bit harder twice, and 3 times, the same again on this one. Okay, and for this one, again going from my reference face here across this way. Okay, so then the next job is to use our nicely set marking gauge, okay, and scribe between those lines. So I'm going to have this stock on my reference face and gently tip it towards me till the points touch the timber, and then gently push away. Okay, so you need to be quite gentle here. You don't want to push those points too deep into the timber. Because of the conical shape, your marks will get wider the deeper you push those points down in, and you'll end up with a sloppy mortise. So just nice and gently scratch those across. Flip it round end to end so I'm still on the same reference face, and again tip it towards me and slide it away. Nice and gently. Okay, so I'm going to keep that set. I'm not going to move that. We're going to need it in a minute to mark the tenon part. Okay, so just put that to one side. I'll just pen those in so you can see them a bit easier. Okay, there we go. That's the bit we're going to remove. Okay, so this particular mortise and tenon doesn't have a shoulder on the very outsides. So we've got there's going to be a shoulder in the centre on each side this way, but there's not a shoulder this way, so we need to be really careful of these outside edges, because any time you go past your line here or here, then that will give you a gap later on. So we need to be gentle with these outside face edges. Okay, so I'm going to start on what would be the inside, the bit that's going to be hidden. Okay, so I'm going to start in here. So I'm going to put it in the vise. If you can clamp it over a leg of your bench, okay, that's great as well, all good. So I'm going to get my 10mm chisel and a mallet, if I can find a mallet. Where's the mallet? Okay, so I'm going to have the bevel pointing into the waist. Okay, so let's mark our waist so we know what we're doing. Okay, so the bevel pointing into the waist, and I'm going to come about 3mm away from the baseline here. Okay, stand that chisel upright. I'm also going to position myself so I can see that this chisel is perpendicular or plumb, so I can see whether it's tipping one way or the other. If I'm standing here, I can't see that, and we don't want the mortise to come through the timber at a funny angle, because that will throw our timber out when we join it together. So I'm going to stand where I can see the direction of the chisel, line it up between those two lines, try and get it nice and square, and give it a good tap. Yeah, going to move along about 1mm between those two lines. Moving along about 1mm again. Try and keep the chisel vertical and not tipping in either direction this way. Break up that surface. closer to the other side. I'm going to turn the chisel around so the bevel's now pointing me, towards me, and just break up the surface there and stop again about 3mm before I get to the edge line. Okay, so I've broke up the surface there. If you use your chisel, you should be able to flick out those little bits, and I've stopped before I get to the edge. Okay, so I'm just going to come in and flick out these little pieces. And go again. Okay, so I've just changed position and I've clamped it down onto the leg, over the leg of the bench now. It kept slipping down in the vise and it was beginning to get irritating. So again, just so you can check your chisel in your side to side direction and give it some firm wax down. Okay, so when you've broken up that surface, you can use your back of your bevel to prise out those chips. Okay, so this is why we leave a gap on each side of our shoulder line there, so that we can use that to lever in with the back of the bevel and force those chips up out of there. Okay. And when you're doing this, try again to keep your chisel plumb and not damaging these side walls side to side. It is quite tricky to do, but take care and you'll get there. So, and again, coming back. Okay, so you can see on there, I'm well past 10mm down into the socket. So I'm going to come from the top and halfway down, maybe 2/3. Okay, but I don't want to go all the way through because I'll bust out and damage all this timber with a nice top surface. Okay, so I've just put a piece of blue tape, masking tape, anything like that, a line with a Sharpie. So the distance from the tip to the tape is 20mm. So I know once I've gone 20mm down, I'm going to be just around 2/3 of the way down into the timber. Okay. So standing where you can see vertical, try and stop the chisel twisting like this. So these Mortice chisels being square help stop that happening because they've got more reference edge, whereas a bevel edge chisel is quite narrow on that edge, so it will twist in the Mortice a little bit easier. But just concentrate on what you're doing. Okay, so you can see in there now, I'm a little over 2/3. I've gone, well, my tape's actually moved, but so keep an eye on that. I've gone down just over 20mm. So I'm going to stop there. And then so now I've gone down just over halfway, and I come back and just trim up these bits we left for levering purposes. So from our face side, we want this to look nice and neat because we're going to be able to see this from the top. Okay, so what we want to try and avoid is too many gaps around the outside. So we need to be really careful when we're doing this top surface. So you could use the standard mortise chisel, your 10mm one that we've been used from the other side. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one slightly smaller. I'm going to go for an 8mm one, so I can keep within my centre lines easier and not damage the outside wall. Okay, so what I'm also going to do is reinforce those knife lines. Okay. So just make them quite prominent, not too deep, but quite prominent. Get my marking areas again, and on my face edge, I'm just going to go over those. Okay. Then I'm going to get a bevel edge chisel, and at quite a low angle, I'm going to set back from the line about 1mm. This makes it easier in the vise. I'm going to be pushing against it. So with a bevel edge chisel, just come in at quite a low angle and gently wiggle up to that scalpel line, and you'll get a little triangle chip pop out. Okay. And again, don't chisel towards yourself. Turn it round. Okay, just gently wiggle out that little chip, and on the ends as well. Okay, so that's given me a nice crisp line all the way around, so I don't want to touch that edge line if I can avoid it when I'm mortising, and then that will hopefully leave us with a nice even edge that's not torn up by the brutality of a mortise chisel. Okay, so same again, just a slightly smaller chisel. I'm staying away from my line about 2mm, sighting downwards so I can see that it's not tipping sideways. I'm just judging where the middle of my two knife edges are, and tap it down. I'll put it back on the bench for this one. And again, just loosening that material, trying to stay within those little knife cuts. So just show you there, can you see how rough these edges are in here? Okay, so we're approaching the line, the socket from underneath, so you do need to be real careful not to get too close to those. Oh, I just poked through there. Okay, so when you're getting close, don't tap too hard, you'll go straight through and hit the bench, and put a nice big gouge in the top of your workbench. But that material is loose now. And I have gone all the way through. So we'll just get a smaller chisel and poke out those. Clean out the fluff. Okay, so you might be able to see a little step in there. So that's, we cleaned up these edges down halfway. So now we've got to do the same with these edges to meet down there in the middle. So I've got about 2 mil there, so I'm going to go 1, line that up, tap down. I'm going to do 1/2 mil now, so I'm left with 1, do 1/2 mil. Being careful not to go all the way through, straight into your bench. And I can probably get a little bit more there before I go into my lifeline. Yep, and then the last one. There we go. And the same on this side. Have that 1 millimeter. And then the last tiny pass right into the knife mark. Okay, so I've chiselled through and I've met from both sides, so I'm just going to stick a rule in there, or you could use your square, something like that. And I've got quite a rock when I tip that up and down, so I can tell there's a little bump in the middle where where I've met from both sides. They come together in a little peak, so we need to fix that. And on the top, yep, it looks like that's the same issue along the top as well, so we need to go in and fix that. Okay, so I'm just going to fix that with a bevel edge chisel. I'm just going to use some paring strokes, a nice sharp chisel. Okay, so resting my chisel just inside on the shoulder we already created, and gently pushing in towards the middle. Try and keep it controlled. Okay, so pinch up on the chisel and use this hand to push through. Nice controlled, light passes. So just on that flat edge we've already created, and push through. A ruler again. That's much better. We'll check it with a square in a minute, but for the moment I can't feel any rock just in the bottom there. So I'll do the same from this side. And I'm also just going to get some of that fluff off the side walls out of the way. Still got a bit of a rock. Oh yeah, I can see a bump in the middle there. That's much better. So check it from side to side. Yeah, in the middle and over this side as well. Still got a bit of cleaning up on those mortise walls, these long ones, to do, but so far that's looking good. Okay, so I've still got just these outside edges that we left purposely to try and keep a nice clean face on this side. Okay, so I'm just going to pare in, because if you think about it now, we've used a 8mm chisel on this side, a 10mm chisel on that side. This mortise is going to be getting wider towards the back. Okay, so we just need to come in and clean those up. So the first thing I'm going to do, just take a slightly smaller chisel and just sever the fibres coming across the grain up into those corners ever so slightly. Okay, so hopefully by pre-severing those fibres, when we tap down this way with our chisel, we won't tear out along the grain either side of that mortise, but we do need to be careful, keep an eye on it. So dropping my nicely sharpened chisel right into the edge there. So if you've got more than say 1/2 millimetre coming on here, you're going to have to take this in stages and work back to those lines. So 1/2 millimetre is the most I'd like to push my luck and go straight into that knife hole. Okay. Gentle taps down. I'm going to use the mallet on that one. So you get such a small amount. Push that material out of the way. So on this one I've got about 1 millimetre to get back to that little V groove we cut earlier. So I'm just going to take that in a couple of stages. Gently tapping down. And then right into that knife line. Need to come back in this side and cut those fibres a little bit more. It's getting bound up. And I'm just going to take my smaller chisel actually and come down and cross, get those off. And back with my wider one. And again with the smaller one, just to cut them off in the corners. Oops. Okay, so if you don't want to go down, you could pop it in the vise this way. Okay. And come inwards. Okay, so I'm not going from the outside now, I'm happy with that line. So I'm just going to step inside a little bit and push through. So I just spent a bit of time cleaning up the inside faces, and I've put my square. It's a bit difficult to do, but you can kind of tip it at an angle and sight through, and I'm quite happy that the base, that these two walls are nice and flat. And again, I've put my square through there, checking in all the corners, there's nothing in there getting in the way. Oh, actually, oh, there's a bit of a bump in there. So yeah, I can see that. Let's get rid of that. See if that's any better. Yeah, that looks much better. Okay, so I'm happy that it's all flat square. So I'm going to leave it there for the moment and then start the tenon.